Okay. Well, it's Monday afternoon, March 23rd. Hi, everybody. I'm Vicki Suter with Suter Business Builders, and thanks for everybody who's here on the webinar today. As you may have read in the email that I sent out, or maybe you saw it in my Facebook post, but for the last week, as we've all been navigating this territory that we've never been in before, I've been having a lot of conversations with clients who are facing the issues around, I had to lay off my team, or I may have to lay off my team. How do I take care of that? How do I stay connected and engaged with my clients? What about work that has to stop? How do I deal with that? And then how do I just deal with the financial aspect of what's happening in my business, and what is the repercussions of having a not to be able to work, and how am I going to navigate that? So as I was talking with clients, I just kept thinking to myself, there's a lot of contractors out there, there's a lot of businesses out there having the same issues and challenges and questions. And that's why I wanted to do this webinar. I wanted to just share with you the conversations that I've been having with clients. I wanted to share with you some of the insights that I've been getting from some employees, and what are some of the things that you can do about those things, and how do you navigate your way through that? And then also the financial aspect of it, how do you plan for that? And one of the things that I know is that when we have clarity, we have a greater sense of confidence. And when we have a greater sense of confidence, we're able to take more powerful actions. And so my goal with you today is to provide you with clarity so that you have a greater sense of confidence, so that you can go take some more powerful actions as you navigate through this time, and as we navigate through this time that we've never been in before. And a couple of just logistical things as we're going along. So if you are on the webinar and you have questions as you go along, I am going to take questions. There's like 4 different sections to what I'm going to talk about today. And at the end of each section, I'm going to open it up for questions. Now, my associate, Dortha Heise, is on the line with us, and Dortha is going to be tracking all of the questions in the chat. So if you have questions, please make sure to type it in the chat, and then Dortha will capture it, and then she'll read me those questions as we come to each of those points of Q&A. And we're gonna be here for about an hour, hour and a half, depending on how many questions you have. I'm happy to hang out and answer questions, as long as need be. I really want to make sure that you get value from today, and that you feel a greater sense of confidence about how to move forward. At the end of the webinar, so as I go along, I'm going to tell you about some different, as I show you stuff, especially when we get to the financial side of it, I have some tools that I've been working with clients with. I'm going to give you those tools. So the reason I did this in a webinar format was so that I could send people out all those tools, and I'm going to share with you today that will help you. And of course, there's no charge for any of that. And then if you're watching on Facebook Live, if you have questions, the same kind of thing, type it into the chat. Dortha will capture those questions, and then she'll ask them of me at those different points during the webinar. So what are the different areas that we're navigating? I'm just going to share my screen here. So one of the things, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about our teams, and how do we stay connected and engaged with our teams. I want to talk about our clients and communicating, and how often we should be communicating, and how to give them that sense of assurance as well. We'll talk about prospects, and about how to continue to nurture those relationships in a way that's really just mindful and respectful of the time that we're in. And then also our finances. How do you have clarity about the cash flow impact of what that situation looks like, and this situation looks like for your business? So let's start with I loved this quote actually while I was preparing for this yesterday and I was looking through some information. I came across this quote by Maya Angelou that said, "I've learned that people forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." And part of the reason I really wanted to have this quote in here is because I thought it spoke beautifully to what is our charge as leaders right now about how we communicate with our teams, how we communicate with our clients. And I'm going to share with you some stories of conversations that I've had with both business owners as well as with employees this week, and how that's showing up for employees as well as business owners, and how can we make sure that we address the reality of what is happening for people. And then I also really liked this quote, "The courage to be vulnerable." Brene Brown posted this yesterday. "The courage to be vulnerable is not about winning or losing, but it's about the courage to show up when you can't predict or control the outcome." And I thought that just said it really beautifully, right? We can't control what's happening right now. And it's kind of an interesting thing. You know, I've been through a lot of recessions over the last 30 years of being in business. And the thing that I know is that when we usually go through a recession, that we are faced with having, like, there's just certain conditions, like there's a mind conversation, like, well, what did I do? Or how did I cause this? Or what should I have done differently? And so sometimes in the midst of a recession, we have to navigate our way past our own self chatter in order to move forward. What's interesting about this time is there's something happening with this coronavirus that is affecting everybody in the world. There's not a human being walking the face of this earth that at some level is not being affected by this. And it's such an interesting time. And as we navigate our way through it, I think that the thing that we can keep in mind is I don't have all the answers. You're even going to find as we talk today, and you know this, it's like this is a very changing landscape. And so as the landscape changes, how do we adjust and how do we navigate our way through it? And particularly as leaders, how do we do so in a way that allows our companies and our organizations and our teams to keep motivated and to keep working together collaboratively. So team's the first part that I want to talk about. And what I'm seeing is there's 3 different scenarios for how people are working right now. It's interesting. I just got off a coaching call with my Build Your Dream team students, and I had somebody from Austin who said they do not have a shelter-in-place order in place yet in Austin. Ottawa's goes into place, Ottawa, Canada, somebody else, theirs goes into place tonight. I'm in Northern California, ours went into place last week. And when the shelter in place order goes through, then you're faced with a different set of choices. And then when you lay off people off of work, and some people are going to be able to work from home, some not. So then how do you navigate that? So I want to talk about each one of those. So there's working may have been laid off. So as an example, the person I was talking with, Austin, earlier. You'll notice that every one of these says staying in daily communication. I think this is so important right now. People are starved to know what's happening. It's interesting. I spoke with one person who's an employee. She's a project manager, and she's working from home. And as she's working from home, every morning, their project lead gets on the phone with their team and lets them know, all right, like, what are we up to for today? Like, what's our goal for today? What are you up to? And I said to her, so how's that working for you? And she said, I said, is morning better than the afternoon? Like, what's a good time to do that? And she said, morning's really good because it makes me stay to a certain routine. So for her, as she's working from home, having that check-in call first thing in the morning, she goes, it makes me get up and, like, if nothing else, I'm sitting in front of the camera ready to have that conversation with my team. And she said it really helps me maintain focus. Now, it was interesting because this is somebody who is super disciplined, who has a tendency to be somebody who's a very self-starter. and who also doesn't have kids at home, who said to me, I honestly, she goes, I'm really struggling with keeping a certain amount of focus. And I thought that was interesting because I think that we need to realize that, and probably this is true for all of us, right? There's a certain amount of like sort of just anxiety or distraction, or like, when's it going to end, or how long is it going to last? And then imagine if you have if you own a business, there's all of what you have going on, but then imagine you're an employee and it's like, am I going to get my job back? When am I going to get my job back? Maybe I went on unemployment. Like how much is that going to be? Am I going to be able to make my rent? Like there's lots of all of that. And then add to that, like the really big elephant in the room, which is, oh my gosh, like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be healthy? I need to go to the grocery store, or if you have young children at home, like your whole world just changed. Now, if you're trying to work from home, that's just an extra added stress. And I've heard from people that some people have their kids that are in school, some people are remote learning, and some they're just off. So how do we navigate our way through that? This is why the first thing on here on every one of these is stay in daily communication. I highly recommend that you look at getting Zoom. This is the format that we're using right here today in order to communicate on this webinar. For the first 45 minutes, it's for free. And then it's like, I don't know, some really inexpensive price if you just go look on Zoom's price page for more than 45 minutes. It's a great tool for being able to get in front of people. And I highly encourage you. One of the things, I've been using Zoom for a couple of years, and when I first started learning to do it, it was super uncomfortable. Get okay with being in front of the camera. People don't care. That goes back to that Maya Angelou quote. People don't care what you look like. They don't care what you do. They don't care what you say. They care about how you made them feel. One of the greatest ways to have people feel connected to you is if they can see you and if they can feel that connection with you. So encourage your team to, like, even if they're on their phones or whatever, to just put the camera on, be in communication as much as you can. I'm going to share another example, the exact opposite. I talked to somebody else today who's an employee who got notification that they were being laid off via email and text. And then and I said to him, I said, so how was that? And he goes, it was really scary because I didn't know, like, how long does that last? Yes, I'm listening to the news. Will they hire us back? Are they in financial trouble? And he was making up all sorts of stuff in his head. Now, he said his manager started doing calls with his team. He said that was really helpful, like not calls, but texts. He said he at least appreciated that sense of community with his manager. He appreciated that sense of community with other people on his team. But he said, I said, is there something that you wish that would have happened differently? He goes, well, a couple things. He said, one is that when they laid me off, which is this second section here, that they would have given us some more direction. When we tried to go to the UI website, the unemployment website, and file for unemployment, he goes, I had a lot of questions. I felt very overwhelmed. I had to call, a couple of other people to try to get through it. He goes, and English is my first language. He goes, we have people on our team that English isn't their first language. And I know it was really hard for them. And I saw that in the text chain. So one of the things that if you are faced with, maybe if you had to lay people off, if you're about to lay people off, I highly encourage you that you get someone on your team who is a point person to maybe get on a, depending on the size of your team, it might be you can have your office manager, call each person and walk them through it. This is, of course, after you have personally told them that you're laying them off, right? If you have to do that and you have a small team, I highly encourage you to, even if maybe it is a Zoom call, but maybe call each person individually. I had a client I was talking to the other day who his initial communication was via email. And then when I talked to him on, I guess it was Friday, he said, yeah, I got that it was really a problem that I communicated it that way, even though I gave him the link to how to file for unemployment and all that. And he goes, everybody was watching the news, but he said, I saw that it was really having a bad effect. So he called everybody. He said, and now I'm scheduling calls with everybody every day that is working, and every couple of days for the team that's laid off. So how do you make that easier for people? Maybe have someone on your team who is walking people through how to file for unemployment. Also, how do you maybe you could do a Zoom video that walked them through it, or a Loom video. Loom, L-O-O-M, is another resource where you can actually record your screen as you're doing it, and then it saves it on Loom, and then you could send that as a link to your team. So it makes it super easy to walk them through that. The other thing that can be really helpful is let them know what you're doing in terms of that communication, to let them know what you're doing as a company, right? We're researching options for being able to put you back on payroll. We're looking for other ways to be able to compensate you for the fact that, 3/4 of your pay just got cut. We are looking for ways to make sure that we stay in front of clients. Here's what we're doing with clients. Here's what we're doing with customers. Like, just that communication about what you're doing, whether you're about to lay somebody off or you have laid somebody off. Those are that's just that taking care of that emotional element that so many of us are facing. How do you just let people know what's going on so they can feel a greater sense of assurance? And from every employee that I spoke with this week, I have heard that over and over again. I just want to be communicated with. I know we don't have any answers, but just let me know what you're doing. What are you thinking? So that can be really helpful. And if you have people working from home, this is a great opportunity to work on deferred projects. We've all been talking about we've been so swamped and so busy for so long. How do you take advantage of this time and keep connected with people and keep focused on certain projects? Or is there training, even for the people who are laid off and they're not working from home? Is there some training you can have them do that will help improve their skills when they do, when you are able to start working again? Let's see. So I'm going to kind of go through this because I know I was sort of talking all over this slide as I was talking here, but working maybe laid off, again, number one thing, staying in communication. 2, keeping them safe and keeping them informed. If they have been laid off, staying in daily communication, letting them know what you're doing. By the way, daily communication for somebody who's laid off might be one of those Loom videos that I told you about a second ago. Might just be you record a Loom video, go, hey, here's what I'm knowing here right now. Here's what I'm finding out. Here's what we're doing. I'm going to keep you posted. Just that little touch of letting people feel like they're not cast out, that they're still part of the team. It is super important. You have worked so hard to build the team that you have. I know you have. I have spoken to, I just know I've spoken to so many of you about what you're doing to make sure that you have been working on building a strong team over these last couple of years. This is the time to lean into that next level of communication. Take advantage of this time to do that. And then, like I said, keeping them updated on what you're doing. And if they're working from home, how to keep them focused. Like I said, for one woman I spoke with this week, it was that morning huddle. That was just, what are you getting done today? And that might seem a little bit like micromanaging, but honestly, what it really was for her, she said it was just a way to keep her focused on what do I want to get done today and today, because we are so distracted, right? With just that, that kind of underlying concern. Something that I was made aware of just today was that there is a FFCRA. I'm going to show you this. That may be something that we all need to check it out. I have not had a chance. Literally, I found out about this late this morning. It's called Families First Coronavirus Response Act, Employers Expanded Family Medical Leave Requirements. This is a way for you to get support and financial support for being able to bring your teams back on and to keep them on payroll so that people are not experiencing this huge drop in their income, and so that they're able to do things like pay for rent, groceries, they're able to stay home and take care of their kids and so on. So it really covers a lot. Just from skimming it, it covers a lot. Pretty much anybody who is in a situation where you are having to stay home, or you're having to care for your kids and stay home, your employer has stopped operations, then this act speaks to how you can get financial support as an employee and an employer. Again, I have not looked at it in detail. This is one of those things that's kind of like an hour by hour evolving thing, but from what I did see, it looks way more beneficial and pretty amazing compared to what you're going to get on unemployment. So I would definitely check that out. And if Dana Balistreri is listening to this, thank you for sending me that today. Okay, so that's it for teams. And I want to, before I start talking about clients, I want to open up this for questions. So Dorotha, have we gotten any questions about that? And can you just tell me what read those questions to me?
Actually, the question that we have is for the next section under clients. And then we did have a request for the link. And yes, Mike, we'll get that we'll get that out for you, the link that you were just sharing for that
CRA.
CRA.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, let me do that right now. There you go. Okay. Then I will go on to the next section. So staying the course. Part of what we need to be doing as leaders is to make sure that we're staying the course with what we're doing in our business. I know there's it's interesting because as I've been talking with people, some people have said to me, like, I'm kind of tired and I'm a little glad to have some of the pressure be off. And honestly, I can completely appreciate that. And there's this other thing about the fact that we have been so busy that what we have been, what's happened. So a flywheel, let me describe to you what a flywheel, I'm going to read this definition to you. So a flywheel is a heavy revolving wheel in a machine that is used to increase the machine's momentum and thereby provide greater stability or a reserve of available power during interruptions in the delivery of power to the machine. What all that means is a flywheel is something that its own inertia, its own momentum will keep it going so that it does not require as much exertion on your part in order to keep the momentum going. So we have been in this, we've had this flywheel of activity happening, particularly in the contracting industry, actually in our economy in general, right? Look at our unemployment rate has been at an all-time low until 2 weeks ago. Or a week ago, that the flywheel has been going under its own inertia of demand. And all of a sudden, coronavirus hit and it stopped, or it has slowed significantly. And it was starting to slow last week. It's really going to slow this week as there's more and more cities and counties and states that are requiring people to stay home. And so the question that becomes, how do I make sure that I keep that going, and understanding that I can't be out there working on somebody's roof or replacing the siding or painting their kitchen or remodeling their bathroom or whatever. How do I make sure to keep that work going? Well, so a few suggestions I have when it comes to keeping projects moving. So work may stop. So that's where some people are, like that woman I spoke with in Austin today. You're going to find that every one of these is going to say some of the same things I just talked about. The one key thing is communication, staying in communication with your client and obviously your team too, but and also making sure that you're keeping them safe, right? If you are continuing to work, and then keeping them informed. So as I've been talking to some clients as they were, and so for some of them, they are working remotely, so remote project progress. So I have an interior designer that when we were talking last week, actually a general contractor and interior designer, we were talking about what are all the things that you can keep moving forward with your client in order to keep them in momentum. Like there's certain, how many of us are on projects where clients have not been making decisions, or we're not getting clear specifications resolved, or requests for information. There's a lot of things that can keep moving forward in that front. Also, there were a lot of people that I heard who were stopping physical work on the job, but they said, listen, we need to make sure to get those cabinet orders in, or those material orders, or those furniture orders in, so that you can make sure that when we're back working, we have it. And we need to get more lead time right now because everything is sort of slowed down. So let's get those orders in. So what I've been hearing is a lot of keep in front of it and see how much you can keep moving with your clients so that there's not just this standstill. And again, all of this, what does it require? It just requires a certain amount of sensitivity, right? It requires an empathy and a compassion for who, understanding what's their business. I'd go look at all my customers and go, what's their business and how are they being impacted by this? So that I have an understanding of that and I have that clarity, so that when I go into that conversation, I kind of have a little bit more confidence about how to navigate that conversation with them. I would also highly recommend that even if your work has stopped, set up regular check-in meetings with them. One of the things that I have heard from a lot of clients this last week is their customers wanted to know that they were going to come back. They don't, even if they had just signed the contract or they were about to sign the contract, that they want to know that that project is going to keep going. So don't assume, there's one rule of thought that says, we're headed into a recession and that, people are going to not want to do the work. It's not necessarily true. I hold that this time, we don't exactly know how it's going to unfold. Now, I tend to be rather conservative in looking at, I always want to look at the worst case scenario and I want to plan for it. I'm all about that. I'm all about, I don't like bad surprises. Nobody does, right? But I'm all about how can you see to that future before it's here as much as possible. We don't know though, right? It's not like, we don't quite know how this is all going to unfold. And I have no idea what all the government is doing. Although I look at that FFCRP thing that I just showed you, right? That's providing relief, that act that's providing relief for employers and employees. And I go, wow, that one little thing right there could be a game changer for a lot of working class people. It's not all the solution. Right? We don't know what it all is. So so why am I saying this? I just encourage you to stay the course with people and assume that unless somebody says, you know what, I'm just not going to do it, then keep the course with them. Don't ignore the elephant in the room. Have compassion about it. Know what their issues might be in terms of what their business is, how that might, their lives might be getting impacted. And keep in communication and make requests along the way. Like, how can I best support you? How can I help you through this time? Is there something that we can do remotely? Come up with a plan before you get on the phone with them. And then I would just make sure that you're checking in with them regularly, even if work is stopped, just to go, just want to let you know, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing on our side. Here's what how we can help you. And let them know that you are staying in front of what's going on their projects, because that's what people want to know. So I'm going to open it up. Dorotha, do we have any questions on this section that I haven't answered?
Yes, there was a question from George. Is it okay to send out billing to clients right now? What's the best way to navigate this? What sort of verbiage can we use so we don't come across as tone deaf?
Great question. And you'll see when I get to the finance side of it, I'm going to say unequivocally yes. one of the first actions that I recommend that you take is that if you have billings that needed to happen, that you make sure that, if you've got revenue that's been earned, make sure to do those billings. The world of making sure to bill as much and as often as possible hasn't changed. If you have revenue that's been earned, bill for that. You have no idea what somebody else's situation is, and don't assume that it's your situation. Don't assume that you know. And one of the, I started this conversation and I said, my goal with you is so that you have more clarity, so that you have greater confidence, so that you can take more powerful actions. That's true for your customers as well. So the more ways that you can have them be super clear about where they stand so that they have more confidence about what actions to take, the better you're serving them. And I'm going to say that really all I've been talking about so far, whether it's your team or your clients, is how do you help them have more clarity so that they have more confidence, so that they can take more powerful actions? And that's really why is communication in here all along? Why is it that I'm saying use Zoom? Why am I saying connect with people? Because that helps people have clarity. They want to know what you're doing. They're looking for your leadership right now.
And then we had one other question from Tony, and he wanted to know if does a Zoom or Loom or similar apps work with messaging? My crew members do not have computers at home. They only have smartphones.
Smartphones, it works with smartphones. So Zoom is a platform that I have used on my phone, my laptop, my computer. It works on any of those platforms, and it works exactly the same on any of them. And it doesn't matter if it's an Apple or an Android. The app is super easy to download and very easy to use. In Loom, what it is you record on your screen. I'll actually show you. I can't record one because I'm using the camera for this. Trust me, I tried last week. So Loom is this little, I can click on this icon. So what it does is I could have something on the screen behind me and I go start recording. I can't do that now because, like I said, my camera is being used for this webinar. But I would click on start recording, and then I could record a little video. Maybe I have something up on my screen that I'm sharing. It will record whatever. It'll record you in a little thing like this, or you can also like use a little, it'll record you like this. And then it will also record whatever's on your screen. So it'll ask you what screen what do you want to be sharing. So it's super easy. I just started using this about 6 months ago, and it's very, it's just super simple to be able to like send one. I do this. I think Dorothy, I probably sent you a few of them. Just like, you have a communication with your team about something, you want to clarify something with somebody, you want to show them your screen and have them be able to have, that connection with you and see you and hear you. I've loved this. And so after you're done recording, super simple, it renders the recording, and then it says, do you want to send this in an email? Do you want to copy the link? I copy the link, I throw it in an email or a text, and it goes off. So it's super easy. And again, you can do this on your phone, on your smart tablet, on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer.
Okay, and then Diane shared, she might have missed this, but she just found out that this her state, she's in Michigan, through unemployment benefits will pay employees up to 45% of reduced work time. So if you've worked 14 to 45 hours, the employer can apply for unemployment replacement funds for those employees. And she was just sharing that it pays to keep checking with your state's unemployment agency to see what programs are put in place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Diane. Yes, I have to say that this has been, since I started checking this on Monday with unemployment, like 7 days later, and there's all sorts of more support out there than there was a week ago. And that's a really important thing for you to communicate with your team, because if they filed for unemployment, they just got told that they're making 25% of their pay. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, you're kidding. But then as I've been reading more and like gathering more information, I've found some of that out too. So thank you, Diane. That's great. So I completely agree with you. Yeah, keep checking.
And then Mark said, the question seems to be to work or not to work. Legally, construction is labeled essential by the state, but public does not know this, and people are getting upset when they see construction happening.
Yes, it was a conversation last week that I had with several people, because when the order came down last week to shelter in place, I literally that morning when that order came, I was in a meeting with a client, and she was getting text from the general contractor, like 3 of them saying, yeah, that order's in place, but we're going to keep moving because we're essential and we want you to come to the job site. And she said, listen, I don't want to put all of my painters on that job site. I don't want my guys. I just don't want to do that. On the other hand, there are certain things in the infrastructure that we need that we cannot stop doing, right? So I think that you got to weigh it based on what your business is doing. If it's somebody's home and that's the place where they're living and they don't have a functioning toilet, then that's a problem that they need to have fixed. And then there's the person who that's their second home and they're living up in Tahoe. That job site doesn't really need to be worked on. I think you've got to judge it, but more importantly, I think you got to keep people safe. And in terms of people's judgment about that, contractors are working, and that people are worried about it. Part of what we have to realize and understand right now, and I have found myself saying this to a lot of people this week, is stress brings out the worst in us, and fear brings out the worst in us. And so I think to some degree, we all have to make space for the case. And I think that it's like, if it's really important to you, and if you're one of those contractors that's out there, that you might have a sign on your, on the side window of your truck saying, here's what we're doing to keep our, community, our clients, and our employees safe. Or that we're a requirement, like something like that. If that's really bothering you, that might be an idea. Otherwise, like I said, maybe make space for the case. If you're one of those people that has to be out there working, then, are you keeping people safe? You're keeping your clients safe. I have a electrical contractor who works with me who he's just made the decision, because he could be out there working. He made the decision to not keep his team working. He said, didn't want to do that. Wanted to make sure to do shelter in place, because he felt like, their services are not really essential, even though that he could have fought the case about it. But what he's doing this week is he has N95 masks and protective gear, and he's having his crew deliver food for people who are 65 and shut-in, over 65 and shut-ins, who need, want to make sure that whoever's handling their food and bringing it to them is being completely safe and not putting them at any risk. I thought that was amazing, right? So I'm hearing a lot of people who are finding other ways to communicate how they are supporting people during this time too.
Looks like the last question for now.
Okay, thank you. Good questions, you guys. So marketing. I read this quote this morning by Henry Ford that said, stopping advertising to save money is like stopping a watch to save time. It's an interesting thing. This do I keep marketing? I have heard all sorts of things from people about this topic. And the one thing I would say, I follow a guy by the name of Tim Grohl, who helps people promote their books, and he's a book launch expert. And one of the things that Tim always talks about is he says, marketing is nothing more than being relentlessly helpful to people. And so the question, I think, is not, how can I hawk my wares? How can I sell? And it's never been that. Marketing is never about selling something that they don't need. And it's never about trying to get somebody to buy something that they don't want. it's about how do I be helpful? How do I bring resources and support to people? And I say, stepping away from it, just like when we were talking about the flywheel example earlier, you need to keep the wheel moving. And if you stop marketing altogether, and I've seen people who have stopped marketing and stopped doing any business development as they've been super busy. And here's what happens. When you market, you get super busy, you stop marketing, the work starts to drop off, and then all of a sudden your revenue goes down, and then you start to market. And then what it causes is this roller coaster, right? This is no different. So prospects, managing the relationships with people who are in your pipeline, the people that you're supporting or that you've been in conversation with, right? There's nurturing new relationships. There's I've been in conversation on a project, or I'm on the project bidding phase. So let's talk about each of those. I'm going to start from the right. If you're in the project bidding phase, look for ways to keep it moving forward. Just like when we were talking about projects, are there certain decisions that people can make? You can still do Zoom calls to present proposals and bids. And actually, this is a great opportunity to get comfortable with that, because I think there's a lot of times when people have wasted time or who have sent a proposal via email when a face-to-face would have been much better. So how can you get comfortable with Zoom and presenting stuff via Zoom? Set goals for the next steps and manage to this. So this is a really good opportunity because it's a little more fluid, right? It's not like a project where you go, all right, well, we've got a schedule. We have all these things happening. How are we going to navigate it? A project is a little bit more predictable. A relationship that is not in a signed contract, but is in some phase of developing that relationship, developing know, like, and trust, looking for ways to be helpful to help that client. Again, this all comes back to the same thing again, right? How do I help them have more clarity so they have more confidence so that they can make a good and powerful decision? I would look for ways to do that. And if you're in conversation on a project, but nothing is started, then how do you stay in communication via email, via notes, maybe calling, right? Again, you know what a prospect might be going through. Maybe look at and think about, I have somebody last week that I talked with general contractor who has, he's amazing. Steve's amazing at keeping in communication with his pipeline and prospects. And he does a really lovely job at nurturing those relationships. And, he was saying that he's calling people that he's started conversations with and just let them know, hey, I'm still here. I still am interested in, moving forward when you're ready to move forward. Would you like to have further conversations? He's sending follow-up notes. He's really great at, like, if there's an article or if there's something that he thinks is helpful, he's sending it to them. He's not sending them the latest updates on COVID because everybody's sending us emails about what they're doing around that. But stuff that would be helpful for that client specific to their project about how can they have more clarity so they can have more confidence so they can take action and keep moving forward. So it doesn't mean, it just means how do you stay connected to them? Looking for ways to keep it moving forward. Like I said, are there certain decisions that you can help somebody keep moving it forward with? And then I would recommend that every time you end a conversation with anybody, whether it's your team, your client, your prospect, what's the next action? And get a what and a by when. I recommend always what and by when. If you want to feel like you're keeping things moving forward, get a what and a by when. Because this, one of the things that really helps maintain momentum is doing those two things. And if you're not sure if somebody's going to want to talk to you, again, let's say, you just go, when is a good time that I can call you back? If they say, this isn't, I'm really distracted right now. A simple question, and this is good, by the way, anytime in a prospect and sales relationship is to ask the question, when would be a good time that I can follow up with you? Somebody says, I don't know. Would it be okay if I just, I'll keep track of it. I get, you got a lot going on. Would it be okay if I called you in 2 weeks? Yeah, that would be fine. Okay, great. Thank you. When you get that agreement from somebody, by the way, they're much more likely to be responsive and answer the phone when you call, as opposed to you left it sort of ambiguous. One of the funny things about us as human beings is that our fundamental desire is to keep our agreements. The thing is that we oftentimes don't make explicit agreements. So I recommend that you do that. And I could say that about what we've been talking about in terms of employees and in terms of clients. What and by when? Really helpful. And then if you're just nurturing a new relationship, I highly recommend, and again, you should be doing this anyway, right? Make a list of who all those project prospects are, and then find out how you can support them. Remember my, quote from Tim Grahl, how can I be relentlessly helpful in helping them wherever they're at right now? And be actively marketing with, whether that's postcards, handwritten notes, phone calls. One client I had a conversation with last week, and they do a lot of their work with GCs. They're a subcontractor. And in the last year, they've moved away from doing much work with subs or with homeowners. And I said, listen, I highly recommend that you start to speed up that touch point and that connection with homeowners, because when this flywheel slowed down, you got to just remember it's going to take that GC some time to get that flywheel moving again and get some momentum. And you're going to be at the back end of that. It may not be immediately, but it will be 3 or 6 months down the road. Because immediately when you go back to work, they're going to want you to go back to work. But whatever momentum they've lost in this 3-6 weeks period of time when we're stopped from doing business, that's going to take a while to get that momentum going. So you want to have some work in there with those homeowners that are going to allow you to fill that gap. So I recommend that, again, you're not being pushy, right? How can I be helpful? Maybe it's, postcards, handwritten notes, phone calls, if it's somebody that that could maybe just use a phone call just as a, hey, how you doing? Right. So it's just a way to keep nurturing those relationships, and not in a, any kind of scammy way, and not in any kind of way that disregards what's going on. Somebody made a very lovely point to me the other day about when you send an email out to somebody, don't ignore the elephant in the room. You can just mention, wow, during these really, changing time and this time of uncertainty, I've just been really thinking about, how I can support people. And I've been thinking about you, right? And then go into whatever, you can shift right off the topic. But it speaks to and addresses where people are at. And I would say that's true for our teams. It's true for our clients. It's true for our prospects. It's true for our families as well, and our friends. We don't have to dwell on it. We don't have to have that be all consuming of what we talk about, but it's just respectful and acknowledges it. And then we can move into the conversation. And I'm gonna say that I think that people are eager to have conversation around possibility. I think that's really important. I think our job as leaders, particularly right now, is not to be Pollyannish, but to speak to the possibility. I truly believe in my heart that there are, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute and I'll answer any other questions. I really believe that there's something good that's going to come out of this. There's some way that we are going to be transformed as people, as a nation, as a world. And I have no idea what that is, but I really believe that there's something good that will come out of it. At the very least, some things that I know good are going to come out of it is people are going to get a rest. I think people are going to learn how to work differently. I think people are going to get some projects done on their house. I think people are going to get closer to their kids. I think the flurry of all this stuff that we've had going on kind of makes us slow down. And I think there's other gifts, and I don't know what they all are, but those are just some of the things that rattle through my head. And for me, I go, I'm going to navigate every day, and I'm going to deal with and listen to and pay attention to what's going on. But I will not let the negative part of it define me, because the one thing that you and I have choice about is our perspective and is our attitude and how we look at things and how we think about things that we have choice about. So I encourage you that as you're, we're about to shift to the finance side of this, and we'll talk about the number side of it and how do you navigate this. But you kind of get the idea that everything that we've been talking about up until this point is how do I focus on staying connected and being in relationship and being in communication. I think that is the number one most important thing that we can be doing right now with our teams, with our clients, and with our prospects. All right, Dorothy, I see 11 questions on there, so shoot away.
Actually, I think those were from earlier. I'm not seeing any new questions.
Oh, okay.
Check the Facebook.
Okay. You guys have any questions while Dorothy's looking on Facebook? Do you have any questions about any of this? Anything about the tech side of it or? No questions, Dorothy?
No questions. Everyone's all quiet.
Okay. I've been sharing my PowerPoint presentation, right? You guys are seeing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I've been known to share the wrong screen on occasion. So finances, let's talk about the money side of this, right? I'm closed down for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Like, what does that mean to my business? One of the things that I always say is if you can see it, you can do something about it. Excuse me. So I don't think this is the time for us to hope and wish that it's all going to turn out. I think this is the time for us to lean into and look at the numbers. So I'm going to walk through these few things with you, and then we're going to go look at some real numbers and some examples of what are some things that I recommend that you look at in your business on the financial side to get a better understanding of how to manage the cash flow impact to your business. So collect receivables. So somebody asked us earlier about, should I bill for the work that I've completed? The question is absolutely yes. You should be billing right now for all of the work that you have completed. And then, and by the way, this is in the order that I would recommend that you addressing each part of your business so that you can assess the financial impact. Each one of these steps will help you. The second one is review your receivables outstanding and call on everything that's past due, and then stay on top of those due dates and make sure to to collect on those receivables. If you're somebody who is used to just sending an email or a statement and you're uncomfortable with picking up a phone, I highly encourage you to get comfortable with picking up a phone and making those phone calls. And I don't mean harassing people. I just mean that you need to take responsibility for you and your receivables outstanding. It's not your job to take responsibility for how people pay that. You could, if you think that it would help your customers, you could accept credit card payments, and they could pay via credit card. You would have to pay a fee of 2.5%, 3%, but you're going to get your money paid. In 2008 and 2009, when people were struggling, but they did not want to stop working with me, I started taking credit card payments to make it easier for people. So that might be an option for you as well. But my first thing is you want to make sure to keep that cash coming in. If you don't pay attention to your receivables, and if you don't make those phone calls when you need to make them, stay on top of them, get agreements with people. Remember back to the thing I was saying earlier, a what and a by when. Always, before you hang up, I'm going to try to cut you a check. I'll get it to you as soon as possible. I'm going to check my cash flow and I'll have to let you know, are not agreements. Those are generalizations. What you want to do is make sure you have a specific what and by when at the end of that phone call. It doesn't have to be, and I'm not saying be a jerk. I'm just saying make sure that you get an agreement. All right, second piece is project backlog. So project backlog is what projects do I have that I am in contract on? And I'm going to show you an example of this in a second. What projects do I have that I'm in contract on and that I have started or are not started, but I'm in contract? And then what projects do I have that I'm in the process of closing that I have a 90% or better chance of closing? And spreading that out over the next 12 months and looking at where they're going to fall in your production schedule. So what will this do? Well, having the information about what's the potential of what I'm going to build based on my backlog will allow me to be able to see where my revenue stream is going to fall. And if I can see where my revenue stream is going to fall, I can see where my profitability is going to be. And if I can see my profitability, I can understand something about my cash flow. So that would be one of the first steps is just get clear about what is the work that I have in front of me so that I have a greater sense of confidence about how to project that revenue in the future. And then identify, like I said, so the first one is what do I have signed? The second piece is identify projects that are in my pipeline that could be signed. So a little distinction in terminology here, backlog and pipeline. Backlog is it's signed, it's in contract. Pipeline is it's a potential project that I'm in conversation about that I've either talked to somebody, I've begun design with them, I have maybe a design agreement, I maybe have a pre-construction agreement, maybe I have a bid out to them and I'm about to close it, right? So those are all potential stages of a pipeline that I want to keep track of. So those are the distinctions between those two terms. And then I would also recommend in terms of project backlog is that once you have it, that's a really great tool to communicate to your team. So if you just had to lay off your team, or you're about to lay off your team, or you have part of your team working from home, whatever stage they may be in, I would recommend that you communicate with them and let them know, hey, here's what we got in backlog. This is what we have in signed work. This is when it's going to fall. So you're going to come back to work as soon as this is done, like just reassuring them of that, if that's the case for you. And then the last piece is assess your cash flow needs. So I recommend that you create a budget projection for the year by month. Now, I'm gonna send you a template for doing project backlog. I'm going to send you a template that you can use. I'm also going to send you a template for being able to do a simple budget. Budgets for your company are no different than budgets for a project. Same concept. It just is, where is my money going out? Remember, if you can see it, you have that clarity, you can have more confidence about knowing what to do. When you can see it, you can do something about it. So we'll talk about that and I'll show you a sample budget. And then include in it debt servicing. So I've got income and expenses, but then I might have loan payments, or I have to, I've got to make estimated tax payments, which by the way, the IRS has deferred all April 15th tax payments to July 15th. So you have a little more leeway there. Any borrowing options, you want to identify that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that when I show you the numbers. And then maybe renegotiate payment terms. So once you see what your cash position is, it might be a negative number, it might be a positive number, then you're going to want to look up and go, okay, I don't have any work coming in for the next month. But I'm going to have all these expenses to keep my business open. How am I going to manage that cash flow wise? If I don't have any cash reserve, then I'm going to end up having to go into the hole. Well, do I have a line of credit? Can I borrow money from, can I pay for some more stuff on credit cards? Can I renegotiate my obligations? A lot of lenders are, readying for the phone call that says, I need to renegotiate. Can I have 30 extra days to pay that for my suppliers or my vendors? Can I have 30 extra days to, can I defer that loan payment for 2 months? Maybe it's even your mortgage, your landlord renegotiating rent. I had somebody last week, a couple people last week who called landlords and said, can I renegotiate the rent for, a couple months? Because their business, when they had to do shelter in place, they immediately saw the drop off. So let's see what it looks like when we're working the numbers. So the first thing, I'm actually going to share this screen so I don't have to look sideways. Dorothy, we have questions. Let me answer those questions.
Sure. David asked, should we strive to work out payment plans? What about discounting total amount owed in order to collect now?
I really, so I caution you about discounting. So you have your two questions. What about having payment plans for people? And then two, what about discounting? If you're really in dire need for cash and like I actually had a client who did this in 2009. They were in a very tough cash situation, and they really needed to get paid so that they could keep their doors open. And they offered a 2% discount for a cash payment, or even a 2% discount if the retentions got released on their project. And that worked for them because they had clients who had the cash flow that could do that. In terms of, so what I would say is assess your financial situation before you offer that up, but not necessarily a bad idea. I would not, and I'm gonna say this to you in terms of you're thinking about how you're pricing your projects. This is not the time to cut your prices. Do not do that. That's a lose-lose proposition where you're going to end up signing projects where you're losing money, and then you're going to have a hard time delivering on those projects later on because you're in the hole. And I'm going to I'll talk a little bit more about that and understanding the durations of projects. In terms of taking payments, again, I would do it with, how does that impact my cash flow? What does that look like if I don't have that money now? My whole thing about numbers and money is if you're going to do it with your eyes wide open. Understand the repercussions of those choices that you make.
And then a couple of people were letting you know that they had to hop off early. And then SS said they know for them that they feel dumbfounded and overwhelmed. They have no idea what to ask, as we've never encountered something as fluid and as fast as is going on now. So I think maybe just some additional questions, and you might get into that with some of the stuff you're about to cover, but that was the question there.
Can you clarify that question for me, Dorothy? I'm sorry.
I think they're just kind of wondering like what questions to ask, because it feels like, from the way I'm reading it, it feels like they're overwhelmed and don't know how to go to their clients. Potentially, I'm asking for clarification in the chat as well.
Oh yeah, SS, if you could just give us a little more clarification, that would be great. Like, where specifically are you talking about? That would be great, because then I can give you a more useful answer. Thanks. Dorothy?
Yeah, I'm waiting for a response.
Anybody else? So any other questions?
No, those are all the ones so far.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. All right. So let's take a look at each one of these. So this is a receivable aging report. So whether you use QuickBooks or Sage or whatever, Timberline, I guess it's not, that would be Sage with 300 now, but whatever your software is, pull up a receivable aging report so that you can see how much is owed. That's 90 days past due, 61 to 90, 31 to 60, 1 to 30, and what's current. Even if you don't keep your stuff in software that would give you this report, write it out. Like, who owes you money and how many days past due. This particular company, This particular example that I'm showing you only has 18,000 outstanding in 90 days plus, but I would be going out to this project and looking at what I would be going out and looking at this project and looking at what it would take to get that payment done. Now, obviously, 18,000 compared to 276,000, almost 277,000, is a very small amount. But I'd be paying a lot of attention to this 169,000 and finding out when it's going to be due, right? I would recommend that you first assess this, right? So this is where you want to begin. What collections do I need to make? And then the second thing that I said is to take a look at your backlog. So this is a sample of a backlog report. And what this is, and this happens to be January through December, but you might have this for, just March through or April, depending on when you think that revenue is going to come in. One recommendation, let me just explain the sheet to you, and then I'll explain about how you might use this. And again, I'm going to send you this worksheet. So I'll send you a blank one, a template. So this is work in contract in progress. So this would be all of the projects that you have that are in process that have amounts that you already are billing as you're going forward. And when do you think that you'll bill those? And then there's projects in contract, not signed. I'm sorry, in contract, not started, right? So you're in contract, but they haven't started. And how do those flow out? And then what I would do is look at, okay, so what's the total sold and in progress, or not in progress, not started? What is that total amount? So it just adds up those two sections. And then I look, and so on this particular sample, I have a budget in here. So this particular company, let's say it's this sample company has 2.4 million as their revenue goal. And they are looking at, there's a gap between what they have in signed work and their budget of 1.2 million. And then the second section down here, third section, sorry, is what's in your pipeline. So remember, backlog is work that's signed and in contract. Pipeline is work that I'm either in initial conversation on it, I've done some preliminary rough budget or rough order of magnitude or ROM on it. I am in design on it, I'm in pre-construction on it, or I'm bidding on it. Any one of those stages where you might be that's pre-signed contract, any of those, looking at it and saying, okay, which of those jobs am I at about a 90% confidence rate that I'm going to get? And then list those out. When do I think those projects will fall? Now, it may be that when you first did this, right, that if I look at March and April, you might go, yeah, you know what? Those didn't happen in March, so I'm going to move them over here to May because that's when I think it's going to happen. And that one didn't happen in March because that was the last 2 weeks. I'm going to move that over. And let's say you go, I'm moving all of this work over to May. Well, I'm leaving April completely open. And let's say you do the same thing here. Now I know that leaves me $200,000 short from my budget in this particular example for the month of April. And I might move all of this. So let's say this didn't happen, and I move it to May. So now what I can see is I go, well, in this particular case, all the way down here on the bottom line, well, let's take a look at this. My numbers for the year didn't change, but now my numbers for the month of April, maybe March and April have changed. That's the information we have right now, right? So I know about that. Let's say there's a good chance, you're not going to be doing anything in billing in April. Let's say that's the case for you. Or maybe it's dramatically reduced, or maybe it's half, or whatever it is. So by seeing what projects you have open and then asking the question, is it going to get deferred? Is it going to keep going, but maybe at a slower pace? Because maybe I'm doing outside work and I got one guy working on it and I can keep him working. That's not a problem. It doesn't put him or anyone else at risk. Am I a service business that has to keep working, and maybe it's, my business isn't going to be impacted at all. But one of the things about seeing it like this is that you can start to at least see what's the impact. And if there's projects that, are way out here and they haven't started, I wouldn't assume that they're not going to start. Right now, we only have what we have in terms of information, so projecting that out there. And then I could look at down here at potential work. And here's the cool thing about doing a worksheet like this on your backlog. What I like about it is it lets you see at any point in time, where do I stand now compared to what my goal is? And how much of a gap is there between those two numbers? In this case, when I look at this company that has a budget of 2.4 million, my work in backlog in contract and my work in pipeline, that's a 90% plus chance that I'm going to get that job. Now I'm at 1.5 million. I have to get 850,000 more in work for the rest of the year. So this can be super helpful for you also to keep in mind that the big elephant called, I got to just sell work that happens this year. Well, how much work do I have to sell this year that I have to produce this year? So what it can do is to start to give you more clarity so that you can have more confidence about what's the most important places for you to focus when you look at that pipeline of potential work. Where do you want to focus? If you have one or two projects that's going to make up that whole 850,000, it's probably not the case for this company, but like depending on your company, like when you can see that number, you might go, yeah, those are the most important places for me to focus. So every time you get information, that clarity, when you start to put numbers down like this, that clarity will let you know what actions to take. So how do I use this information in terms of managing cash flow? Well, if I just saw how much that revenue is going to fluctuate, then what I can do is come down here and go, okay, I'm actually going to show this one. What's the financial impact to my company? Well, let's say I've got a minimum amount of revenue in March, and I've decided I'm taking all the revenue out in April, but in May, I'm going to, and let's say worst case, I go, I'm only going to do 70,000 in May. This, by the way, is a slightly different set of numbers than the ones that I was showing you, but for example purposes. So what does this mean in terms of my profitability? Well, I'm going to look at, so how this budget is set up is I say, okay, I'm going to, let me actually show you this. Say I set the budget for the year and I started out and I said, I'm going to do 1.8 million in revenue. And these are my costs for producing that revenue. This is my cost of goods sold. And in this particular budget is based on, and this is true for the template I'm going to send you, is based on assuming that materials or labor is based on a certain percentage of revenue. Generally is the case for a contracting company that produces a certain gross profit margin consistently. So that's that revenue. Originally, when I budgeted it, was 1.8 million. And I'm going to hide the months here just for a second. And my gross profit off of that 1.8 million is 750,000. But then I go down here and I go, okay, so what's it going to cost me? What's my budget for things like advertising or meals and entertainment or citations or gas or any of these other things? What's my budget for the year? By looking at what you're in, whether you use this template or you use something else, what's the purpose of it? The purpose of it is so that you can understand, what does it really cost you to run your business? What's the burn rate on your cash flow every month to keep your doors open? Labor is always your largest amount, right? Payroll, salaries, your biggest amount. And then there's everything else. There's rent, utilities, telephones, cell phones, all of those. And especially understanding that during a time like this, those things may go down to some degree, but they're not going to completely go away. So what is that nut that I have to cover? And then in addition to that, what do I have in terms of what am I going to owe in estimated taxes? What are my loan payments that I have to make? And if you're a sole proprietor, you want to look at it and also go, what is the owner, you can't not pay yourself. So if your payroll is not up here, and I give you this example that shows officer salary, if you're not a corporation that gets paid in payroll, you need to make sure that you also include a number in here for yourself of how much you need to be taking out of the business. I'm going to say that number is low. But it depends on where you are in the country too. So I appreciate that. So once you have those numbers, this template that I'm going to send you, when you put the numbers in by month, then what it's going to do is in this column D, it'll automatically spread it by month. So this might be the first cut that you take at it, right? You initially go through and go, here's what we're going to do. And then you're going to look at it and say, okay, so how am I going to, the landscape's changed and I'm not planning on any revenue for April. And my March revenue got cut in half. And I think my May is going to be too. Again, you decide for yourself what you see the landscape to be. I have some people, so I've been doing this all week for this past week with clients. And as I've been doing it, some people have said, I'm going to take March at what it is after I finish my billings. I'm going to take April out completely, and I'm going to assume May is 100% of what it was before. I have some people saying, I'm going to do half of March, half of May, and take April out. The point is not that there is a right way to do that, but once you have these numbers on here, then you can much more easily start to kind of play with the numbers and look at where do I want to adjust. Something to know about spreadsheets that you get from me, by the way, is that every field that's in yellow is an entry field. Every field that's in black and white is a formula field. So it makes it super easy. So let me show you an example. So in here, what we did is I took the example of we're cutting March in half, we're taking out April, and we're cutting May in half. So I made it 70, 0, and 70. And in this case, I went in here and I said, what if for, everybody still got paid in March? And especially right now, because that resource that I shared with you a little bit ago of the FFCRA, let's see. Sorry, I told you it was really new to me. Yeah, Families First. That's still on there. Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So that act says, hey, we're gonna infuse in money to make sure that you keep your people on payroll so that they're not going on unemployment. So let's say you say, I'm going to do that. Or let's say you say, I'm going to keep all my field people working. I'm going to keep them on payroll. And I'm going to spend that time educating people. I'm going to have them do training and education. Or I'm just going to make sure that they stay on payroll. You may get I don't know how the reimbursement's going to work. So honestly, I can't give you a definitive answer about that. But let's say for the sake of just cash flow purposes, you go, you know what? I'm going to leave this payroll exactly at what I think that monthly nut's going to be, even though I don't have any revenue coming in. If you have everybody on unemployment, you could make all that zero, right? But I know if I'm not doing any revenue in April, I don't have material costs because I'm not purchasing materials. Maybe I do because I had to purchase materials ahead of time. Maybe there's some, some exception to that. But at least this way, I can start to see those numbers. And I see that, first of all, I'm going to, between March, April, and May, I'm going to lose $62,000 in gross profit. And then what you might do is start looking down here at your costs and maybe go, yeah, I'm not going to spend that in April, so I'm going to make that zero, right? And start just looking at where am I going to cut costs. So you might start adjusting this number based on these numbers here, and start cutting wherever you're going to cut expenses, or maybe you cut the whole year. But the thing is, the particular approach you take doesn't matter as much as that what you want to do is be able to see what's really is it costing me. Even if you just pull up a profit and loss statement for the last couple months and go, okay, if I don't have any revenue for the next 2 months, how much is that net that I have to pay for? And then, by the way, if I keep my team, what's that going to cost me? So this, even if you don't use this budget tab, this tab would be very helpful. So in this tab, I'm going to make this a little larger so you can see it easily. This is where you have something that says, all right, so what's the real cost of each of those employees? So if I have everybody working full time and those are the hours and that's the gross pay, and this is how I'm going to continue to carry their insurance benefits. These are my employer costs, right? Employer taxes and then workers' comp. And then let's say I'm going to pay everybody out their vacation. I'm going to keep accruing that. What does that really cost me? The way this worksheet works, again, remember, yellow fields are entry fields. Everything else is a formula in here. Really easy way for you to be able to see. It cost me $425,000 for all of my staff, $35,000 a month, and $8,000 a week. That's a really helpful number. So even if you don't do the budget side, come in here and look at the labor projections so that you can see what the labor projections might be and what that net is that you have to cover. So once you've done the budget, once you've come up with the numbers and you know how much of a hit this is, then let's say I come down here. Let's say I decide to keep everybody else on payroll. When I look at January through May, I have a loss of $200,000. So how do I figure out how that's all going to work in terms of the numbers in my business? So here's what I recommend. Pull up a balance sheet, and I'm going to send you this worksheet as well. And do this cash summary. This will really help you. So what is this doing? What we're doing is we're looking at what's my cash position, where do I stand, just from a snapshot point of view as of today. So as I've done this with clients, it's been super helpful for people to get their arms around, like, how much of an impact is this loss going to be for these few months? Or how much am I going to be, how much do I have in reserves, right? So it sort of gives you a snapshot of your financial health. So the first thing I'm going to do, over here on the left is a balance sheet. So a balance sheet is going to tell me how much do I have in my bank account? How much do I have in reserves? What do I owe in receivables and do to me in receivables? What do I owe in payables? So this is super simple. So my cash in my checking account, I got $24,000. So I'm going to put $24,000 in here. And then I've got payables due this week. So this is just a snapshot for the week. So in this case, I've got payables. When I go down here and I look at these total payables, I've got $72,000 in long-term debt. In current debt, which is usually my payables, I've got roughly $114,000. I know that 60 of that is due this week. And let's say I have receivables outstanding. So I'm going to look at that receivable list, right, that we were looking at earlier, and I'm going to ask the question, how much am I going to collect of that money this week? Because my total outstanding is 276. So let's say, for the sake of this conversation, I go, I'm going to get 85,000 in this week. And let's say I decide I'm going to pay everybody out vacation pay. So let's say, like I talked with a client last week when we were doing this, and they had vacation pay. And let's say I'm going to spend 20,000 on vacation pay, because I'm going to pay everybody out their vacation, and that's going to all hit this week. And then let's say payroll's due this week. So I've got that payroll, and that's $8,117, $177. That's just for 1 week. So if you were on biweekly payroll, then that might be, again, you're just looking at a snapshot for this week. So what it tells me is for this week, I'm okay. I got $37,500 should be in my checking account after all that's done. But then I look at, let's take a kind of a more global look at where am I in terms of the financial well-being of my business. You pull out your balance sheet and you go, okay, well, I got 24,000 in my bank account. Payroll checking account. In this case, I have none, so I'm going to put 0. Receivables outstanding. I have 276,708 outstanding in receivables. And then current liabilities. That's my payables. I'm going to come down here, and it's 114,000. That goes in there as a negative number. So what that tells me is my ultimate cash liquidity is $187,000. Now, a couple things that I would recommend as you're looking at this, if your receivable aging report, your receivable report shows like this one does 277,000 of receivables, but it's not all collectible, or not all collectible in the short term, then I would maybe adjust that number. And you could do this and put projections in here for, next week and the week after and the week after, right? So you might have some ways to like just project this out that using this template. And then I'm going to leave that 276 for the moment, but let's take a look back here. What did I say that loss was? On here. Sorry. Let's just do this. So I come down here, and that total loss through May, I'm anticipating is $200,492. So I'm going to stick that number in there. I'm going to change this date to say 5/31. Oops. So just based on my regular checking account, that leaves me in the hole about 14,000. But if you recall, I have money in reserves. I have $200,000 in reserves. So now when I look at, I've got 200,000 in reserves, now I go, all right, I can withstand that hit. I can even, in the scenario that I was just showing, not lay people off. I can look at how I can maybe use this time as a way to educate my team, as a way to get projects done, as a way to keep things moving forward. Now, this particular company that we're looking at in this sample of data is based on a company that has cash reserves. I appreciate that not everybody has cash reserves. Ideally, by the way, you would want to have 3 to 6 months equal to overhead expenses in cash reserves. I didn't make up that rule. It's just a good rule of business that you would hear from a lot of people for reasons, unexpected events. And in this case, that this company did. But let's say you had no reserve. And let's say that you started out with less receivables, right? Let's say if I change this number, and let's say that you go, you know what, I'm only going to collect 176,000 of that. I'm probably not going to be able to get the rest of that, or maybe some of it's outstanding in retentions or whatever. And let's say I have nothing in reserve. Now I'm in the hole 114,000. Why is it important to look at this? It's super important to look at it because now I can see where the landscape lies. And now I'm faced with certain decisions. So what are the decisions that I have to make? A, can I renegotiate some expenses and some debt? B, can I renegotiate, can I get cash in faster? C, are there borrowing options available to me? For that 100,000, do I have a line of credit that's available to me that I can borrow against? Do I want to make some more payments on credit cards? What are my options, right? But now I have that clarity. I know where I stand. I'm not happy about being 114 in the hole, but I can see it. And now that I can see it, I can do something about it. So I highly recommend, and this is really simply what I did. And, I gave you the budget template, but honestly, you don't have to do this budget template. Take your P&L, scratch numbers on a spreadsheet, figure out what those dollars and cents are. Include in here your estimated tax payments and loan payments when you do this equation, right? So even if I added in here, and I guess I didn't do that, usually it's in current liabilities, but loan payments and taxes. And let's say I said that was 60,000. Right. Now I know although I will say the taxes aren't due right till July. So that's not really true, but I do have loan payments. And let's say I've got 4 months of loan payments. And let's say that's 4,500, let's say 3 months. So I'm 118 in the hole. I don't care if you use the budget template. You can. I'm happy to provide it for you. The overhead labor projection tablet and your cost of labor might be really helpful. It's a super simple one. Just get comfortable, know what your cost is, know what it's really costing you to run your business, and then do this snapshot. Look at your receivable list, look at your backlog, look at what your, cost of running your business is, look at, your numbers, stick them in here and go, yeah, here's what I can do. Here's where I stand. Being able to get sort of this big picture view is really going to help you have more clarity about how do I proceed? What are my choices? What are my options? And remember, my whole thing is if you can see it before it's history, you can do something about it and you can have more control. Okay, Dorotha, we're right up at 2:30 and I know I'm probably running a little bit over. So I'm just going to open it up for questions, or tell me what questions that you got in there, if any.
Looks like most people are just commenting. No questions. Glenn, I did see your question about the link, and please let us know if it wasn't the FFCRA link, and if there was something else that I can share with you. We're happy to do that.
Okay.
And then Mike said, thank you. Yeah, people don't plan to fail. They fail to plan.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, thanks. I appreciate everybody who is here. And I'm going to send out an email with a link to this recording to anybody who had signed up for the webinar. And I'll send out all of those resources to you as well as links. You can just download them and feel free to give me a call. And I think, I'm going to keep I know I kind of packed a lot into this webinar today, but I'm going to try to keep doing some of these every week as ways of helping people. So if there's particular areas that you would like to hear more about, if you want me to do a deeper dive on any subject, please feel free to, instant message me on Facebook, send me an email. I am happy to do this. I am super committed to being in service to you and supporting you during this time, and want to share as much as I can of what I know. So let me know if there is a way that, if there's something that you think would be a good topic, let me know, and I'll make sure to see if I can't do that. All right. I think we're going to end the Facebook Live.
We do have one quick question. Do you have a page to estimate interests?
Say it one more time, Dorotha.
Do you have a page to estimate interests?
To estimate interests?
Mm-hmm. I'll ask if Eloisa could clarify bank loans.
Do I have a page to calculate interest on bank loans? Yeah, you know what? I'll include in there a amortization schedule. I'll include it in the stuff the downloads that I send in the email, and you can easily use that, Eloisa, to stick in a loan amount and an interest amount, and calculate loan payments. Yeah, good. Lots of nice comments. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Eloisa. Good. Okay, I'm glad that helps. All right. We'll stop the Facebook Live. For everybody who's joined us on Facebook Live, thank you. I've never done a Facebook Live this long. I hope that you found this to be helpful. And for everybody